Hello my lovelies, my name's Tara and welcome to my channel where I talk about all things sewing, vintage inspired and DIY style. In today's video I'm going to be sewing a gathered skirt with tiers. It's a super simple project and it's one of my favourite pieces to wear through the summer months. It was inspired by I bought from a thrift shop yonks and yonks ago, and I've worn it so much that I thought I really should make a few more before it falls apart, which sadly it's starting to do. So the first one that I made was this one out of white linen, and the lower tier, if you can see, is made from an Edwardian petticoat that I found a long time ago, and it was in terrible condition, but the trim on the bottom was really beautiful. So this is one of those projects where you can sort of use a bit of this left over, a bit of trim. It's a really lovely project. The other thing that I would say is there's loads of versions of a gathered tiered skirt around. I always think that they look a little bit mean with the gathers. These are incredibly full and voluminous, and I personally really like that. So my pattern and directions, which you can find in this PDF download, which you can buy from my website, I'll link it below, aren't based on that rule of one tier is however much, a metre, and then the next one is 1.5 times that, and then the next one is 1.5 times that. I don't do that. I've worked out these measurements based on this vintage piece, and it gives you a really lovely full floaty swishy skirt that is elasticated around the waist, gathered around the waist, so it's super comfortable. Can eat ice cream and feel quite comfortable. This is the one that I will be, because I've done some time travelling. This is the one that I'm going to be showing you how to make today, and hopefully you'll sew along with me. Look at this fabric, which I got from Jacob's Haberdashers, which is just my local sewing shop, and it's a lovely lawn with these beautiful, look, they're so sweet, parasols. So to make your gathered skirt you need 2 meters of fabric, a tape measure, dressmaker's pen, the pattern from my website, and some fabric scissors. And the first step is to neaten off the raw edge. I'm using my pattern master here and a chalk pen, and you're going to measure from this point using all the measurements supplied in the PDF pattern. And then after you've measured out all the panels, you are going to cut out. So you'll have 1 panel for the top tier, 2 for the middle, and 3 for the lower tier. You're going to pin each tier right sides together and sew on your sewing machine with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. And then I've overlocked to neaten the seams after, but you can French seam them if you prefer, or any alternative neatening method. Then you press all your seams flat, and the next thing to do is to create the channel for your waistband. So I've created this handy measuring guide and pressing guide, patent pending, and I am first pressing over 1 centimetre. This cardboard guide gives a really neat edge and is easier for me than tape measures. And then press over again by 2.5 centimetres, which creates the channel for your elastic to go through. I leave a little gap open so that I can thread the elastic through, and then I sew all the way around apart from in that little gap. I cut my elastic simply by putting it round my waist and pulling it a little bit tight. And then I use a safety pin to thread the elastic through the channel, and I also pin the end of the elastic to the skirt, because it's so annoying when you are threading it through and then you get really carried away and pull all the elastic out. This is a really good tip just to stop things like that happening. And then when I've pulled that all through, I just sew the elastic together, pin it, sew it just with a straight stitch. And the next stage is to gather the middle tier, and you can see here that the panels aren't actually even, but that really doesn't matter. I'm not worried. I've just put a little pin there just to indicate the two sides, because I like to sew my gathering stitches in sections just in case the thread breaks, and it just makes life a bit easier. And I do that using the longest machine stitch setting, and I do 2 rows of stitches very close together, which you can see here. And the next thing is to gather those as evenly as possible onto the top tier, and that's what I do here. So I hold the stitches and I just very carefully take my time pulling the fabric rather than the stitches, if that makes any sense, to gather up as evenly as possible. So I just by eye do this. There's probably some kind of equation you can do, but I'm not very mathematical. And I'm going to put the fabric right sides together, and I'm going to just pin and fiddle with the gathers until the tier fits the gathered tier fits the fabric of the top tier. And then I'm going to pin lots and lots of pins. I think sometimes people don't use enough pins, but one of my mottos is pin, pin, pin. So that's all pinned, and the next thing is to sew that panel together. I always just double check before I sew, just to make sure I'm completely happy, because it's easier to do that than to start unpicking stitches. And then I sew with the 1.5 seam allowance, and then after that I am going to overlock the seam, but you can use a zigzag stitch if you want to, and just double checking that I'm happy with that before I actually do overlock. And then the next thing is to, just in exactly the same process, but there's a lot more volume of fabric, is to gather the lower tier, pin it, sew it, and then overlock everything. And finally, on the home stretch, using the measuring guide, the pressing guide, I'm going to do a turn and turn hem. So for this, that's 1 centimetre press, then another 1 centimetre and press, and then I'm going to top stitch that all the way around, and then I'm going to give the skirt a final press, make sure that I snip off any stray bits of thread, or rectify any kind of mistakes. And there we are, the skirt is done. So I really hope you've enjoyed sewing with me today, and you feel inspired to make your very own Calypso skirt. If you do, please head over to my Facebook page, Tara Deighton Atelier, and join my sewing circle. It's great to share the things that you make, whether they're from my pattern or anything else. Lots of lovely tips and tricks and support over there with a lovely group of people. I also would love to say a huge thank you to everybody who watched last week, my very first YouTube video, and sent me such lovely praise and support. I was really blown away, and I was very surprised that people subscribed and watched it. So I'm really truly grateful. I hope you have a wonderful week full of sewing and sunshine, and I'll see you soon. Bye.